Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on how to create a study schedule. My name is Sean. I've been with RX Coach and on ScholarRx for about 3 years, working on our coaching and tutoring program with students just like you and coaches like some of the ones you'll meet today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our two presenters this evening. First and foremost, we have Dr. Arjun Iyer. Arjun, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Arjun Iyer. I'm an emergency physician working at a small county hospital in Central Valley, California. In addition, I work as the Assistant Director of Medical Multimedia Education for the ScholarRx company, the one that bring you first aid for the USMLE.
Excellent. We're happy to have you here helping us out. We also have Dr. Paras Vicaria. Paras, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Hey guys, my name is Paras. I'm a dermatology resident here in Dallas, Texas. I'm also an RX coach, so I work one-on-one with students such as yourself to help prepare you guys for the USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 CK as well. And I'm happy to help with tonight's session.
I mentioned RX Coach earlier. RX Coach is our coaching and tutoring program. We work individually with students to help them on their academic journey, to help them accomplish their goals and really maximize their potential. We'll talk more about RX Coach later. And with that, I will hand it off to Arjun.
Yeah, so I'll take this from here, and the goal of today is basically to talk about how to plan your time for the dedicated period for studying for Step 1. So Step 1 is set realistic goals. So Paras, I'm gonna turn this to you. What qualities do you think compromise a good goal for Step 1, or really anything in life?
Yeah, thanks, Arjun. That's a great question. I think the most important thing is you want to set a goal that's realistic and attainable, something that can be accomplished in whatever your time frame is. You also want to try to be as well defined as you can and give yourself concrete details and concrete milestones to obtain that goal. So I think, and as we'll kind of delve into this more as we get along with this this presentation, those are the two main things that I think comprise a good goal for Step 1.
So Paras, I'm going to be a medical student for a second. My goal is to review all of first aid by the end of my dedicated study period. Would you say that is a good goal or a not so good goal?
Well, I think, in the principle behind it of wanting to get through first aid is a good goal, but the goal in and of itself isn't setting yourself with concrete timelines of, breaking it down into topics, breaking it down into chapters. How much do you want to set aside per day? How are you going to integrate your other resources into that? And it's you also want to know just how attainable that is based on your study schedule. So that may be a little bit too broad and not enough details in that one sentence you just said. But that's a great thought, and I think we could definitely take that goal of yours and make it a little bit more concrete.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, a lot of the goals meds, and here's just from my perspective, not Arjun as a student. I think that, a lot of the goals med students set for themselves are good in theory, could use a little bit of refining to sort of make sure that they are achievable and that there are very distinct time points that they can sort of check in with themselves. How am I doing? Is this realistic? Am I falling behind because of, just a one-off, like maybe I just needed to get in the swing of things? Or is this symptomatic of, the fact that something about this plan is not realistic? Are there things I need to be factoring in that I didn't account for? Stuff like that. How frequent should your time points be where you check in with yourself?
That's a great question as well. So, you can ask yourself, should my goals be daily? Should they be hourly? Should they be weekly or monthly? And I think the answer to that is all of the above. I think we should be having our end goal in mind, but keeping in mind that it will take each day to get there. So we want to have those checkpoints to make sure we're staying on track with those goals. And there's a way to have almost like mini goals to obtain that larger goal. So if you want to finish reviewing all of first aid in your dedicated time period, we could set aside mini goals, and that I want to accomplish the cardiology chapter and review that within 3 days, for example. And you can break those goals into monthly goals, weekly goals, and daily goals. So I think the more frequent you can have them, it helps you stay on track.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, man. And here's kind of the here is kind of the very important question, because I'm going to guess that a lot of you med students have run into this situation before. It's a very common one in life. What do I do if I cannot reach the goals or deadlines that I'm setting? Flail your arms around in panic? Yell at the top of your lungs? What do you think, Paras? Yell at the top of your lungs?
Yeah, that might be the initial reaction, but I think it's important to kind of take a step back and reevaluate how you set your goals initially. What were your goals that you set, and how did you set them? Were they too ambitious? Were you trying to get through all of UWorld in a very short time frame? Was it not detailed enough and you weren't giving yourself daily markers to try to obtain? And this might even be a point where if you're having issues determining that, it might even be worthwhile to bring in some outside help to figure out, why is this happening, such as one of your advisors, one of us as an RX coach, when we can kind of help set a study schedule for you as well. But those are some of the things you kind of want to, your first approach if you're not meeting your goals.
Yeah, and this is actually one that I have a lot of fairly strong opinions on. I'll try to keep the editorializing to a minimum, but I think that from my experience in medical school and from the colleagues that I used to, or fellow students or peers that I used to study with, I think that there is a very strong bias to see falling behind on a plan, because a lot of medical students can make the plan and can make it very specific, but there's a cognitive bias in thinking in sort of like thinking of lapses in that plan. Say you fall behind one day, and then the next day, and then the next. A lot of us have a tendency to sort of explain each of those instances away to ourselves. So for example, well, this first day, my out-of-town girlfriend was in town and I had to spend time with her. Or, well, I tried to cook this meal for myself, but I hadn't done all my grocery shopping and I needed to blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And the hardest thing to admit to yourself is that perhaps the plan was not realistic, or perhaps, I don't have to do, 2 different video series and 5 different question banks. Maybe it's okay if I do 1 and 1. Maybe that's just fine. These are things that I think that med students tend to cognitively resist. And I think that having a little bit of humility in sort of reevaluating yourself is important to see when you actually need to pivot, as opposed to simply work a little harder and catch up. Agree, Paras, or disagree?
I agree completely. I think it's always important to pivot, take a step back, and not always, have tunnel vision as well, like you said. I think that's a great point.
Awesome. And we got a poll. So this is time for some audience participation, everybody. How often do you find yourself having trouble meeting a goal that you set? Turn those clickers on and pick from the following options. Most of the time, frequently, sometimes, rarely, or never. All right. So we have people sort of clustered up in the upper range. Most of the time, frequently, sometimes. And that's good self-awareness on your part. It's good that you guys are realizing that this does happen quite often. It's not because, you're all bad planners. I mean, y'all got to where you are because you're very smart, very organized individuals. But a lot of us are just really, really ambitious, or really have, what's the word for it? The word I use is FOMO, fear of missing out. And this kind of leads into the next question, but I think that a lot of times people will feel like they have to do something because everyone else around them is, and they accumulate a list, a to-do list a mile long, that is simply unachievable. So sometimes biting off more than you can chew is really the problem, rather than I am a bad med student, or I am stupid, or any of these other self-deprecating things you might tell yourself that simply aren't true. All right. Step 2, set realistic timelines. So, Paras, my friend, what are the main factors that you try to consider when setting a realistic timeline?
That's a great question as well. So I think, you definitely, when we're talking about timeline, right, you kind of want to ask yourself a few questions. How much time can you reasonably study per day? How many days are you working with in this timeline? Those are a couple things to ask yourself when setting that timeline. The other thing is, how much time has it taken you for you to note progress or make progress? How much time does it take for you to do certain goals, such as get through a block of year-old question? These are all things you want to ask yourselves and be very realistic when you're setting a realistic timeline for yourself, because you want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. So those are generally the main factors that you want to think about when you're setting that timeline.
Hey, but Paras, that's all well and good, but I hear Sean Nanji, the class gunner, is studying 16 hours a day, and he's trying to get into the same residency programs that I am. Does that mean I need to be studying 16 hours a day? Does that mean Deshaun's got it all figured out and I'm just not working hard enough?
That's a great question, and I would respond to that by saying, who's Sean Nanji? Sean Nanji in this situation shouldn't mean much to us. We are driving our own car, and we are driving at our own pace. We're driving our own car, we're driving at our own pace, and we're driving our own race as well. We have our own goals. We're not comparing ourselves to anyone else. Everyone studies differently. Everyone uses different resources. Everyone can study for less time, for more time. And the most important thing is these goals are for ourselves, because this is a very, we're doing this so that we can become the best doctor that we can be. And so we don't want to compare ourselves to people. We want to do what we need to be to obtain our individual goals. So, and I know that's a very common thing in medical school, especially when you see your buddy next to you. He's using his own resources, he's doing his own thing, and you start to get a little bit of kind of what you're saying, that FOMO, that fear of missing out. Should I be doing that? Do I need to do that? And really, the most important thing is you have your own plan, and that's kind of what we need to stick to.
This is really important, guys. I mean, do not fall prey to FOMO. It's going to be the thing that makes you think that you need to be using way more resources and spending way more time than you actually have to. I'm going to just give you guys a for instance. When I was studying for step 1, I used first aid. I used 1.5 question banks essentially, and I made flashcards, and I did a bunch of flashcards, and the practice tests. That's it. I mean, I know I'm known for making videos, but for me, that wasn't how I studied best. I needed to sit with the book and just devote some concentrated effort to figuring it out at my own pace rather than have someone read it to me. And it didn't matter to me that, the most the person who ended up being like junior AOA said, oh no, sketchy micro is, you got to do sketchy micro. I mean, that's like essential. Or you have to listen to 3 video series at Alvin and the Chipmunks speed, where where you speed it up to like 2x and they're all talking like I simply don't think that fast. I might not just not be that smart, but yeah, I can't think that fast. And I would question how much anybody really gets out of fast forwarded videos at that rate, to be honest. More is not always better. Do what works for you. Stick to it. Don't always try to, do what everyone else is doing. Any additional things to consider?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times we get into the habit of saying, okay, I have, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If I, allot, all these days, that'll get me right up into my test date. And, we have to realize that we're not machines, we're not robots. We need to take breaks. We need to rest. So we want to take time for breaks and rest days. We want to have time for catch-up days where we're catching up on some of that material we may not have finished. Review days, we want to set aside time to do self-assessments. I know Sean always talks about this, but a lot of times we're very hesitant to do self-assessments and get that 3-digit score. But it's important that you're thinking of these things as you're setting your timeline. And these are some of the things that are integral to you doing well as well. Mental health and wellness is going to help you succeed very much as well.
Yeah. And for me, the important essentials to really consider are eating, sleeping, and if you're in the practice of a regular exercise routine, which all of you should be, obviously, continue that. Obviously, don't force yourself to do it during your dedicated and it's a brand new workout routine. And that also is, it's not the best idea. But if you're used to an exercise routine, I would keep doing it. I mean, I just know from personal experience, your body feels weird. You sleep weird. And, you don't feel right when the blood stops flowing. I used to every morning run for an hour on the treadmill and do flashcards to myself. I could do both in that way. I don't love running on the treadmill, but it allowed me to do my flashcards at the same time. So keep up with the essentials. That's what I have to say about that. All right, wake yourselves up from your slumber, and here's another poll question for you. How do you fare in meeting your timelines currently? Are you always on schedule with no issue? Do you usually meet most of your timelines? Do you meet about half the time? Do you often miss your timelines, or do you always feel behind? Because this one's a little bit closer to a normal distribution. All right, so it seems mostly clustered around about half the time versus I often miss my timeline. Not abnormal. And it's good to know, because I think the structure of what we're about to present can definitely be helpful in this situation. Paras, any comments?
No, I think that's pretty fair, and I think it's important that you recognize that you may not be meeting your timelines, because that's kind of why you're here, and that's kind of why we're here to help you in creating a realistic timeline and realistic goals. So
Yeah.
props to you for recognizing that.
Self-awareness is important, man. I mean, I think in medical school, it's very common to sort of hide weakness, or what you perceive to be weakness, but self-awareness is the most important thing, to understand, where you may need a little bit of extra boost, and only then can you address it. Step 3, study plan or study schedule. I didn't even know there was a difference. Paras, can you tell me what is the difference between a study plan and a study schedule?
That is a great question. Yeah, and a lot of people, when they first hear that, they use that interchangeably. And really, what it comes down to is do you want to do things that are task oriented, or do you want to do things that are broken down by time? So a study plan would say more so complete 40 questions in UWorld, review, those 40 questions, review 10 pages of cardiology first aid, and crossing it off as a task list one by one as you go through those. That's more of a study plan. The study schedule is more so, from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I'm going to finish a UWorld block. From 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., I'm going to review that block, so and so. So it's more so, are you more task oriented, or do you want to try to incorporate things into a daily schedule? So that's an important difference.
Well, I mean, I get that it's an important difference, Paras, but why would I want to pick one over the other? What are the pros and cons of a study plan versus a study schedule?
That's a great question. And, generally we find that students who are very task oriented and, very, who often create checklists, even in their own daily routine, that this might be something that could benefit them, where they can create a checklist, a list of things that they have planned for that designated time frame. So generally, that's kind of something that would work well for them. It tells you exactly what you want to accomplish. It tells you what your goals for that day or for those 2 days are. And so you know exactly, hey, these are the things I need to cross off. Now, some of the cons of that is it doesn't incorporate really time, okay? So if you're working with a limited time frame, that may not be the best option. You may not be setting aside, I want to do this for 2 hours or this for 2 hours. That's more of a study schedule. So you may find that reviewing those 10 pages in cardiology and all those various murmurs and the techniques to increase them and decrease them, but that's taking a little bit longer than you thought, and you could fall behind as a result, okay? And you could be taking a little bit more time than you expected. So that's one of the main cons of a study plan. Now with the study schedule, one of the pros is that you're setting aside goals based on the exact time frame that you have. If you have a 4-week dedicated period, you are plugging things in to try to obtain your goal within that 4-week time frame. So things are set aside for you essentially hour by hour as to what you should be doing. Some of the cons for this is that, one, it doesn't really provide a lot of flexibility. You're kind of regimented in what you're doing on an hourly basis. And then two, if you have something that's set aside, it can become a little bit too regimented. And you may not exactly know how much time it's going to take to accomplish something. So you're setting aside unrealistic time frames for these goals in this study schedule. So those are some of the cons of both the study plan and study schedule, but also some of the pros as well. And so figuring out which one is best for you is definitely a great question.
All right. And finally, I mean, you kind of covered this. Any other comments on what might be best for a specific student? And how do I know which one is going to be better for me personally?
That's a great question. And I think a little bit relates to, what do you find yourself doing in your daily life? Do you find yourself that you have checklists for the tasks that you want to accomplish? If you are preparing a dinner party, do you have more of a checklist as to, I need to do this, do this, do this? Or are you saying, at 4 p.m., my turkey needs to go in the oven, I'm going to pull it out at this time? Those are some of the things that you can kind of ask yourself. So what do I do in my normal daily life that I find that I'm successful at? Which of those would best allow me to succeed? So you can kind of extrapolate a little bit of information from your non-medical life, non-studying life, to figure out which might suit you the best. And we're also here to help you figure that out as well.
Now, Paras, you used a very interesting turn of phrase, that you are successful at, and I think that this is another area where you really have to play the self-awareness game. Even if you normally operate one way, for example, you set yourself a list of tasks to do by the end of the day. Well, do you usually do them all, or do you find that you do about half of them and then roll the other half over into the next day? Maybe you need a little bit more disciplined of a time-based schedule in that case, in order to actually see, you know, why am I consistently falling short on the tasks I assign myself for that day? Do I need a little bit more of a disciplined hour by hour schedule where I schedule in my potty breaks and my, you know, meals and my dishwashing time, etc. So, you know, go by what you have historically done, but also sort of think to yourself, what has been successful in the past and what is not. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Paras to drive for a little bit. I want to put myself in the role of the student again, because this is actually, you know, the RX study schedule is based on something I made as a medical student, and then developed during years 3 and 4 of medical school when I ran a mentorship program for a number of my peers. And this was a way that I sort of addressed things that I had not been particularly good at. And the reason I keep harping on self-awareness so much is because I realized that, you know, while I was a reasonably good medical student, the way that I had sort of set about, you know, I'm going to do this, this, and this task every day, you know, it was pretty easy for me to fall behind. And if I only have a limited amount of time, this is during my dedicated study period, if I only have a limited amount of time, then I'm going to need to, you know, make sure I'm doing certain things within specific time intervals. That's how this plan was originally conceived. The use has become substantially broader since then. But I'm going to turn it over to Paras, who's going to take on the role of the RX mentor. Can you steal my screen?
Absolutely. Give me just a second.
Awesome.
All right. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Perfect. So this, for you guys out there, this is where you can go ahead and download it. There's a couple ways to get to it, but this is essentially called the RX Study Planner, and it's updated for first aid. Okay. So there's a link here where you can go, and it tells you exactly how you can build this. Okay. So this is the link that you would go to, and then you can enter in your name and email, and it'll send you a personalized link to go ahead and download this. Okay. And so what you do is you will get a copy of this RX Study Planner. Okay. And so you want to save a copy of this to your Google Drive. If you don't have a Google account, we'll help you set one up. There's instructions there as well. Okay. So as you can see, this is kind of broken down into a daily and monthly schedule. So Arjun, I'm going to be, you know, like you said, I'll be your RX coach, and you can be the medical student. And you can see here that this gives you some important factors to consider when planning your day. Reasonable wake up and bedtime, meals, self-care, etc. Okay, so this is something you would want to review before going down here. So let's say that you've gone ahead and reviewed that. Okay, let me go ahead and this out. Okay, you can see here that we've got 24 hours in our day. Okay, we've got sleep, meals, self-care, material review, question bank, going over questions, miscellaneous, and breaks. Okay. So Arjun, how much time would you think that you would like to dedicate to sleep?
Well, I mean, you know, if it's my dedicated study period, I could probably get away with, you know, 5 hours of sleep, because Sean Nanji, the gunner, says he's, you know, studying 16 hours a day. So I could probably get away with 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah, and you know, remember this kind of that's a good point you bring up, because remember, it is absolutely crucial that you get as much sleep as you need to function optimally. We don't want you getting just barely enough sleep. We don't want you to compare your study or sleep habits with other people. Sleep is very important for doing well on this exam. So I don't want you to cut yourself short on your normal sleep time. I want you to come up with the sleep time that is going to allow you to best succeed on this exam. Okay.
I mean, I guess normally I need about 7 hours of sleep to feel actually rested.
Okay, yeah, then I would say we should set aside 7 hours a day for sleep. And how about meals?
Hmm. Well, to eat, I can usually get away with 30 minutes for each meal, 3 meals a day.
Okay, so about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Okay, and you want to make sure and that that meal time is your kind of your normal meal time. We don't want you to be rushing through and scarfing down your food. You want to make sure that you're comfortably eating your meals as well. So I'm assuming that that is kind of what you're saying, 1.5 hours for meals there.
Actually better make it 2 because there's dishes and there's actually preparing the meal too. So I guess I need about 2 hours a day for this.
That's a great point. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad we talked about that.
Hmm.
So what about self-care? How much time do you think you'll need for self-care on a daily basis?
Nah, it's all right. My girlfriend's fine with it. I don't think I need a shower. I think I'm
Well, keep in mind, taking care of yourself is going to be very important over this study period. Okay, so we want you taking care of yourself, showering, all the things that go into just your routine self-care. So we don't want you to be skimping out on that. I don't think your girlfriend wants you to be skimping out on that either. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she doesn't. Also, I would probably feel a little weird about it by the end of the first week. Wouldn't be able to stand myself. All right, so let's say I'm gonna do half hour for shower, toothbrushing stuff, and I do work out every day, so I'm gonna keep up with that schedule. So about an hour for running for 45 minutes, come back, shower. Yeah, let's go ahead and say an hour and a half.
An hour and a half, great. And yes, I think exercise is a great thing to put under self-care as well. So you want to make sure that you're consistent with that wellness or exercise regimen and keep that going throughout your study period. So great. How much time would you say that you'd like to commit to material review?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I feel like I need to study all of first aid by the end of the block, but if I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I have ADHD. I'm pretty sure I can't, sit down with a book for more than 30-minute stretches at a time. So I don't know, let's say I break that up into small blocks. Let's go with 2 hours.
2 hours of material review. Okay.
3 hours,
We'll
3 hours, 3 hours. I
3
lied.
hours. Okay, so we'll put 3 hours of material and review, and like you said, this can encompass a few types of review, whether it's reviewing first aid, other material as well. So we'll kind of come back to this. We'll touch on this. Let's kind of go through and the rest of the schedule and see if we need to make any adjustments. But I think that's a great start. I think being realistic with how much time you can sit down and study at one point to get through material. Okay. So what about a question bank? And then the next one as well, going over those questions. How much time would you like to dedicate in a day to doing questions and also going over those questions?
Well, I know I want to do the entire USMLE-Rx question bank within my 6-week dedicated period. How do I figure that one out?
That's a great question, and that's actually something that we're going to be talking about on our next tab.
Okay. You want me to just fill in something for here?
Yeah, let's actually go. We'll take a look here, and you can actually see based on how many questions you have to accomplish and how many days you have in your study period, you can enter in that value. So let's say you have 1,000 questions, and you would like to break that up over 14 days. Right? You can see that comes out to about 70 questions a day, okay? Or if we
Yep.
were to have 21 days, you could see just how much that about 47 questions a day. So we'll kind of come back to this as well, but this will kind of give you a sense. So let's say you wanted to get through 1,000 questions in about 3 weeks, okay?
So I'm just looking at the Q bank right now. Let's see. Easy, medium, hard. And it looks like there are 2,367 questions that I have to go through.
Okay.
And then I want to do those over a 6-week period of time. So 6 times 7 is 42 days. Let's say I'm studying every day. How many questions a day?
And let's say those are maybe 42 study days and not accounting for break days, rest days, self-assessments. That would come up to about 56 questions a day. Okay, or about 1.4 hours of questions a day.
Okay, all right. So let's go with 2 because I want break days.
We'll go with 2 hours, you said, per question bank? Okay.
Yep.
And then what about reviewing those questions?
Oh, see, I really like to spend some time going over the questions. Gosh, I go over every single one, and that's not saying all of you have to, but that's what helps Arjun out. So I usually take about 1.5 times as long to go over them, honestly. So let's say 3.
3 hours there. Perfect. Okay. And as you can see there, now we've got about 5.5 hours left. Okay. And so we still have a couple areas, miscellaneous areas. So additional things, like you said, maybe that would fall, flashcards would fall under that. Also, break time throughout the day as well. Okay.
Yeah,
how would you like to split that up?
Like I said, I have ADHD, so I kind of need to sprinkle in half-hour breaks throughout the day. I can't just be, sitting on my butt getting a DVT. So I'm gonna say I need a couple hours of breaks in the middle of the day, just to walk, stretch.
Yeah, you want to say about maybe 3 hours a day, 2.5?
I was gonna say 2 hours a day.
2 hours a day. Okay. As you can see, that leaves us with about 3.5 hours of time. Okay. And so we could put that into our miscellaneous bucket, and that could consist of a few things depending on what resources we're using. Are we also watching videos or listening to audio? And that could fall under that. We could also go back and review our original time allotment and say, okay, actually, maybe I want to change this from 3 to 2.5 or 3 to 3.5. Okay. So what do you think with those remaining 3.5 hours? How would you like to distribute that?
Well, I definitely don't think I need to do more than 1 hour of flashcards a day. And if I'm being honest, I probably should be doing, a little bit more than one question bank. So let's go ahead and up the question bank to 3 and 4.5 hours respectively, see where we're at.
Good.
Yeah,
and I know we said about flashcards as an hour. Good. So as you can see, that kind of, and this is kind of setting yourself time goals as well. And then what you can do is you can come over here and then plug in which of those activities you would like to do from which time frame. So we won't go ahead, just for time's sake, we won't go hour by hour and list those out. But you can see here exactly, now you have a really nice breakdown, Arjun, of exactly how much time you're contributing to those things. So let's move on to the next tab. You can see here, we've kind of already broken down how many questions you want to do over those 42 study days, okay? And we were already given the number of questions per day and the number of hours of questions per day. And I know we later in added in maybe another question bank, so that number changed a little bit as well, okay? But as you can see here, what you can do is you can enter in the dates of your study frame, your study period, okay? And then as you set them aside, you can actually individualize each day to tell yourself, okay, well, today I'm going to go through these topics of biochemistry, okay? And you can see that this is taking about a certain amount of time, okay? And if I remove that, it'll change how much time it'll take me to go through that, okay? And so this is kind of estimating if you go through those chapters in first aid and break it down topic by topic, how much time when you set aside for material review, what sub-chapters or areas within chapters could you set aside for a daily goal? Okay, and you can do this each day for that week, and then you'd come down here, you'd have your additional weeks, and you could set that aside as well. So you can see that things are broken down, and this is kind of getting a little bit more into task-oriented or study plan, where you're crossing off things as you go through it, but it's also keeping in mind how much time it would take you to do that, and keeping in mind your original study schedule. Okay. And as you can see here, this is kind of the subject list. So if you go through, you can actually go through all the topics within the various chapters of first aid. It'll tell you how many pages each of those topics has. It'll then tell you how much time roughly it'll take to review that. And you can change the level of review from careful review to normal review or even more intensive review. And you can see that that time doubles as a result. Okay.
Wow.
Or if you've already gone through something, you can decide that you want to skip it. Okay.
That's pretty impressive. That should be good enough even for the most meticulous of schedulers.
Yeah, and so this is something for those of you out there. This is a great plan like Arjun talked about. Really kind of brings in a lot of various components to help you come together and help them come together so you can set aside nice realistic goals and make sure that you're not missing anything and make sure you're putting yourself on the right track to succeed. So I'll hand it back to you, Arjun.
Oh, all right. Change presenter. Okay.
Yep, I
Got
can
it.
see that.
All right, so we've mapped it out. And another poll for you guys. Sean, do we have this one?
We sure do.
All right, so how confident do you all feel after today's talk about making your own study plan or schedule? Do you feel very confident? Are you chomping at the bit to be getting a crack at this glorified Excel spreadsheet? You think you could create one? You could make one, but you'd end up second guessing yourself. Are you not very confident, or you need help? Still at the flailing and screaming stage. All right, pretty good. So we're kind of clustered up at the near the top there. Reasonable degree of confidence. Those of you who are second guessing yourselves, that's not, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, probably based on the other polls, at least a little bit of this is because not all the plans you made have worked out. And so it's important to be able to sort of gauge where you are, assess where you are along the way, constantly be reevaluating, am I falling behind because I was quote unquote lazy one day, or, because of one-offs that keep happening? Or is it time to pivot? Is it time to get yourself an RX coach who can help you pivot and help call you on it when they see that, there's something that needs to be changed?